My name is Sarah Ellison. I'm 38 years old, and 5 minutes ago, a woman who once shoved gum into my locker handed me a trophy that read, "Most likely to still live with her parents." The laughter that followed wasn't wild, it was worse. It was controlled, polished, the kind of cruelty that knows how to dress up like humor. Heather held the mic like she owned the room, like she still owned us. Her smile gleamed as she looked right at me and said, "Come on, it's just a joke. You're not still mad about high school, are you?" I didn't answer. Because in this room, this over-decorated community center in Eastview, Michigan, I already knew my silence said more than any comeback ever could. The tablecloths were plastic. The food was lukewarm pasta and mini meatballs. And yet the people hadn't changed at all. There they were, the old cliques, now older, puffier, louder, still clinging to invisible crowns from 20 years ago. Heather, Brian, Jamie, the whole smug parade of people who once whispered behind my back, and now had the audacity to pretend they didn't remember doing it. But the worst part. Somehow, part of me still cared. I had told myself I was over it, that I came back just to observe, to exist without apology, to prove, if only quietly, that I'd outgrown them. But when they handed me that plastic joke of a trophy, it hit harder than I wanted to admit. Heather smirked, tipping her glass. "Well, it's not like she's married or anything. Still quiet. Probably working at a library or something." The crowd chuckled. Brian Maddox, once a quarterback, now a real estate guy with an ego larger than his salary, let out a low whistle. Didn't even recognize her. Still blending in with the wallpaper, huh? I was wearing a navy blue dress. Nothing flashy. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Not because I didn't know how to present myself, but because I wasn't here to impress anyone. And still they looked at me like I was 12 again. Like I didn't matter. I looked down at the trophy. Plastic base. Gold-painted figure with a mocking smile. Heather leaned in just enough to whisper, "You could have stayed home, Sarah." I wanted to leave. Wanted to vanish, to let the silence take me again. But then the building began to shake. The floor vibrated, glasses clinked on tabletops. A gust of air slammed against the windows, rattling the frames. The lights flickered. Then came the sound, low, steady, unmistakable to anyone who'd ever served helicopter blades. Heather's mic cut out with a sharp buzz. People rushed to the windows, hands cupped to glass, eyes wide. And then, cutting through the dark sky, descending like thunder from the heavens, came a Sikorsky MH-60 Seahawk. Black, sleek, armed. It hovered just above the parking lot wind, howling through the trees, napkins, and plastic plates lifting off the buffet like confetti. Panic scattered in murmurs. "Is this a drill? Are we being evacuated? What the hell is going on?" I stood still, perfectly still, because I already knew. The side door of the Seahawk slid open. A soldier dropped down dress blue's gloves headset. His boots touched ground with purpose. He didn't stop for anyone. Straight through the chaos of confused alumni and fallen decorations, he marched toward the main hall. And when he entered, he didn't scan the crowd. He looked straight at me. Then, under paper streamers between tables of people who never saw me, he saluted. "Commander Ellison, ma'am. Ops breach at Ravensite. We need you. Immediate extraction authorized." The room went dead quiet. Someone dropped a wine glass. It shattered across tile. Brian's mouth hung open. Heather's cheeks drained of color. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I handed Heather the trophy, the one that called me a loser, and whispered, "Hold this for me." Then I turned toward the door. The soldier followed. Every step echoed like a verdict in that stunned, breathless silence. And as I crossed the threshold, wind whipping my hair, spotlight bathing the parking lot in gold, I didn't look back. Not because I was petty, but because they were finally forced to look at me. Not the girl they ignored, not the ghost at the lunch table, but the woman they never saw coming. When the doors of the helicopter sealed behind me and the turbine roared, I felt something slip like a snake shedding skin. That place, that room, those people, they fell away. It was the first time I'd walked out of Eastview without apologizing to myself for existing. I sat upright, strapped in headset on eyes forward. But inside memory was a storm. because to understand what just happened to really feel the weight of that moment, you'd have to know the girl they used to whisper about in the school hallways. The one who ate lunch in the library, who turned in assignments early, who always raised her hand but never got picked. That was me, Sarah Ellison, daughter of a quiet mother and a father who drank too much but yelled too little. The kind of man who could be in the room with you and still feel 100 miles away. The kind who never noticed you crying even when you were sitting at his feet. My mom died when I was 12. Cancer. Fast and cruel. I was there for every appointment, every pill, every tear. My dad wasn't. He sat in the garage, smoking or staring at old photos he never framed. By the time I was 16, I had two choices: vanish or fight to be seen. I tried vanishing first. I wore gray sweaters, walked quietly, got perfect grades. I wanted a teacher any adult to notice, to pull me aside, to say, "Sarah, are you okay?" But no one did. Not once. In high school, invisibility isn't sad. It's contagious. The more you disappear, the easier it is for people to forget you were ever there. I stopped going to school dances. I stopped trying to join clubs. The yearbook committee cropped me out of an entire class photo, and no one even noticed. I remember one day in junior year, a girl named Kelly tripped me in the hallway. My books spilled everywhere. She didn't even laugh, just said sorry, didn't see you. And I believed her, because I didn't see myself either. At 17, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. I walked into the Navy recruiting office and said, "I want out. I want everything this town can't give me." The recruiter raised an eyebrow but said nothing. 3 months later, I was gone. I remember the day I shipped out. My dad didn't come outside. He left a note on the counter. Good luck. That was it. Boot camp broke me down in ways high school never could. But the difference was, the Navy put me back together. It didn't care that I was quiet, only that I was sharp, precise, focused. I wasn't invisible there. By the time I was 26, I was leading logistics on overseas deployments. By 30, I was deep into naval intelligence, managing field units and coordinating threat assessments. They started calling me the Ghost Commander not because I vanished, but because I always saw what others didn't. I wasn't loud. I was lethal. Every move I made was watched. Every decision mattered. But I never told anyone where I came from. I never talked about Eastview or about the locker full of chewed gum and torn notebooks. I built walls taller than any school fence. Until last month when the reunion invitation came. I almost threw it away. But then I saw the RSVP list. Heather, Brian, Jamie. All of them. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe curiosity. Maybe a part of me, the 12-year-old girl still standing at her mom's hospital bed, wanted anyone to look at me now and say, "We were wrong." Stupid, right? But sometimes even ghosts want closure. So I went. I bought a dress that made me feel invisible again, just to test the waters. I drove into town past the gas station that still has my high school photo in a dusty frame behind the register, and I walked into that hall with my head held high. But the moment I crossed that threshold, they made me 12 again. No one asked what I'd been up to. No one said, "Hey, I remember you." Not until Heather's little performance. I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was. Because in all my years in the Navy, in every desert and on every deck, I learned to predict threats, but I forgot how vicious familiarity can be. The girl they bullied had turned into a woman with the authority to call airstrikes, and still, they tried to shrink me. That's the thing about people like Heather. They only understand the world if they can categorize it win or loser. Married, single, loud, quiet, alpha, beta. But I don't fit in any of those boxes. Not anymore. When the soldier saluted me in front of all of them, I saw it in their eyes, confusion, then realization, then fear. The last time they saw me, I was invisible. Now, I was untouchable. As the helicopter tilted upward and the lights of Eastview fell away beneath me, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. Because I wasn't chasing their validation anymore. I was reclaiming my story. The next morning, I was standing on the observation deck of Naval Base Norfolk as the first wave of intelligence reports came in. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, calm, obedient, unlike people. Behind me, the brass murmured through encrypted headsets and parsed classified chatter. A UAV feed flickered on the screen beside us, zooming in on satellite data around Raven's site, where the breach had triggered my abrupt extraction. The real crisis, it turned out, was smaller than expected, but volatile. A transport drone had gone off course and triggered a regional alert. No lives lost, no immediate combat risk. But Command had wanted someone who could assess the threat level without hesitation. They wanted me. And I had done what I always do, read between the lines, built the narrative, closed the gap. Mission contained. But my mind wasn't. I should have been relieved. Instead, I was haunted not by the operation, but by a single moment still spinning on repeat Heather's voice. Still blending in with the wallpaper. It wasn't just about the joke. It was that they meant it. They had no idea who I'd become, and worse, they didn't care. People like them only care if you threaten their spotlight. I stared at the gray Atlantic horizon and thought about something I never say out loud. I don't belong anywhere. Not really. Not back in Eastview where I was the outcast. Not fully here where even my own command sees me more as a tool than a person. And definitely not with my sister, the last family I had left. Her name is Emily. She's 2 years younger. We were close once when Mom was still alive and Dad wasn't drowning in bourbon and broken promises. But after I enlisted, Emily changed. She called it abandonment. Said I left her to deal with everything, the funeral arrangements, the bills, Dad's breakdowns. I called it survival. She never forgave me. We hadn't spoken in 5 years before I came to Eastview for the reunion. I only sent one message in town. Thought I'd stop by if you're around. Her reply was short, suit yourself, so I did. The day before the reunion, I drove down the cracked road to our childhood house. It hadn't changed much, white paint peeling off the porch, a rusted swing creaking in the wind. I saw her through the kitchen window stirring something on the stove. She didn't smile when she opened the door. You cut your hair, she said, not warmly. You haven't aged a day, I lied gently. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Let me guess. Some top-secret visit to reconnect with your roots. I came for the reunion, I said. Her laugh was hollow. What, to show off? No, I said. To remember who I was. To see if I could face it. She shrugged, clearly unimpressed. You know, Sarah, not all of us got to run away and hide behind medals. That one landed. I wanted to say it wasn't hiding, it was climbing. It was rebuilding myself from ash. It was proving I could matter in a world that didn't hand me a seat at the table. But I didn't, because Emily never saw the battles. She only saw the absence. And I had let that gap grow for years. She invited me in out of obligation more than anything. The kitchen still smelled like our mother's cooking, a scent she had preserved with alarming precision. Every photo still hung in the same place. Even the tiny glass hummingbird I bought at a fair in 8th grade still sat on the windowsill, its wing chipped but intact. How's Dad? I asked cautiously. Dead, she said simply. 2 years now. It shouldn't have hit me as hard as it did. I hadn't seen him in a decade. The last time we spoke, he told me I was too serious for a girl and hung up. But still, a piece of me had held out some foolish hope that one day he'd call. Say he was sorry. Say he remembered how much I did before I left. But he never did, and now he never would. Emily didn't linger on it. She poured us both tea and asked nothing about my life. Not my rank, my service, or the fact that I was decorated in 2 operations no one in this town would ever hear about. She only said, I guess you came to gloat. Those people never liked you, Sarah. I didn't come to gloat, I said. You came to remind them you're better. No, I whispered. I came to remind myself that they were wrong. That quieted her for a moment, but not for long. She sighed, setting her mug down. You know what's funny, after all these years you're still looking for someone to clap for you. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure she was wrong. The next evening, after the humiliation and the helicopter, I had considered going back to Emily's, telling her what happened, telling her that for the first time in my life they looked small. But I didn't, because I knew she wouldn't care. To Emily, I'm not a commander. I'm not even a woman with value. I'm the sister who disappeared and came back too late. And in that moment, I realized something deeper than anger, something harder to admit. Even if the world salutes me, the people I needed most never will. The comms officer behind me spoke. Commander report finalized. Debrief at 0800. I nodded, understood. I turned back to the sea, its horizon endless, unknowable. Just like my place in it. That night back in my temporary quarters at the base, I stared at the glow of my phone. The group photo from the reunion had already gone up on Facebook. There they were, Heather, Brian, Jamie, the usual suspects. Everyone grinning like the night had been unforgettable. Everyone but me. I wasn't in the photo. Even after the uniformed officer saluted me in front of all of them, they still posted the picture as if I'd never been there. It was perfect, fitting, cruel. It took me 2 decades to claw out of invisibility, and somehow they still managed to crop me out of the frame. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in years, but my throat burned in that way that comes right before you do. The kind of pain that has nothing to do with what's happening now and everything to do with what happened then. I started scrolling almost obsessively, photo after photo, poses, filters, smug captions like, "Some things never change." Reunion, Queen Legends of Eastview. Class of 2005. Still got it. And finally, a comment that made me freeze. It was from Heather. She wrote BTW Sarah Ellison showed up, barely said a word, left early, still a ghost. That did it. I could have ignored the jokes. I could have ignored the trophy. I could have even laughed off the fact that they'd tried to bury the moment that should have redefined me in their eyes. But that post, that casual dismissal turned something inside me cold. Not rage. Not even revenge. Just certainty. I had been giving them the benefit of the doubt, believing they were just stuck in the past. But this was present-day cruelty. This was grown-up mockery dressed up in hashtags and emojis. And for the first time in a long, long time, I realized I didn't want to just walk away from my past. I wanted to rewrite it. The next morning, I requested a short leave extension. My CO raised an eyebrow. "Everything all right, Ellison?" I nodded. "It will be. I just have something I need to take care of." He didn't ask questions. I had the kind of record that earned silence and trust. I packed light, civilian clothes, one small duffel, no uniform. Because this time, I wasn't showing up to impress anyone. I was showing up to finish something. I went back to Eastview, not for the reunion crowd, not even for Emily. I went back for me. I wanted to walk those streets, the ones I once trudged home from school on head down, hoping no one noticed me. I parked across from the library, the same one where I used to eat lunch between the stacks, pretending I was studying when I was really just hiding. I stepped inside. The place still smelled like old paper and worn carpet. The librarian was different, younger, friendly. She didn't recognize me. Of course not. Nobody ever did. I walked through the aisles, touching the spines of books I used to escape into. Back then, fantasy novels saved me. Books where the overlooked girl always turned out to be the chosen one, where magic existed and people got what they deserved. I remember thinking one day I'll disappear from here, and when I come back, they'll see who I really am. But that didn't happen. Not the way I imagined. Instead of triumph, I got silence. Instead of apologies, I got erasure. They mocked me when I was powerless. They dismissed me when I was powerful. And that's when it hit me. Nothing I do will ever be enough for them. Because people like Heather, people like my father, even Emily, they don't know how to respect quiet power. They only respect what reflects them. That's why they love each other. They mirror themselves in one another's shallow victories. But me, I'm something they'll never understand. And that for the first time felt liberating. Before I left the library, I slipped a note into the inside cover of one of the books I used to read. It said, "To the quiet girl eating lunch between the shelves, you are not invisible. You are becoming." I spent the rest of the day driving, down the road past the old school, past the empty field where we used to run drills in gym class, past the grocery store where my mom used to buy milk and whisper, "Don't let them tell you who you are." And finally, I drove to the cemetery. I stood in front of my mother's grave, the wind cutting clean across the hilltop. I told her everything, not out loud, not exactly. But in that way, you speak when no one's around, but you feel heard anyway. I told her I made something of myself, that I left and I didn't vanish, I rose, that her belief in me, however quiet and brief, still echoed across continents and combat zones. And I told her I was done chasing closure from people who didn't have the capacity to give it. As I left town, I stopped by Emily's house one last time. I didn't knock. I left an envelope in her mailbox. No letter, just a photo. It was a military portrait, one I never sent her. In it, I'm wearing my formal uniform. Rows of ribbons, rank visible, eyes forward. On the back, I wrote 3 words. This is me, not an apology, not a plea, just a fact. And if she chooses to throw it away, that's on her. But she'll never again say she didn't know who her sister became. I returned to base 2 days later, the envelope to my sister still unacknowledged. No text, no call, no sign she even opened it. I didn't expect applause, but I thought naively that something might shift. A pause, a question, maybe even a small awkward thanks for your service. But silence is its own verdict. And in Emily's world, silence from me meant absence. Silence from her meant punishment. Work swallowed me the moment I stepped off the tarmac. Raven's site required follow-up analysis, and I was tasked with compiling an after-action report for command. I had pages of incident logs, timestamps, personnel tags. I moved through them efficiently mechanically. But a strange hollowness began to pool beneath the surface. Something I hadn't felt in years, doubt. Not doubt in my ability, not in my mission, but in why I kept doing this. I stared at a satellite image of a black zone perimeter and thought I could disappear tomorrow and the world would keep turning. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. Stark and cold. I had spent nearly 2 decades rising through ranks, earning commendations, being the first in and the last out. And yet no one outside this chain of command would know if I vanished. Not even my family. Not even my hometown. They forgot me when I was invisible, and now they hated me for being unforgettable. It was a cruel paradox. 3 days after I filed my report, I received an unexpected invitation. An internal leadership summit, naval officers, intelligence directors, civilian advisors, a room full of decision-makers, and I was being asked to speak. The topic, silent strength in modern command. I almost laughed. Me speaking on silent strength, it felt ironic, poetic even, but I said yes. On the day of the summit, I put on my uniform slowly, methodically. Double-checked every button, every ribbon, every crease. Then I stood in front of the mirror and saw her, not the commander, not the intelligence officer, but the girl from Eastview. She was still there, but she wasn't afraid anymore. I whispered, "You made it." She didn't answer, but she didn't flinch either. The conference hall was pristine. Mahogany paneling, clean white linens, rows of flags lining the walls. Military brass filled the seats, polished and sharp. When I took the podium, there was no applause, just quiet anticipation. I took a breath and began. I used to think leadership was about volume, rank, presence, the loudest voice in the room. Pause. I was wrong. And for the next 12 minutes, I told them what it meant to lead from the margins. How being overlooked gave me clarity. How silence isn't weakness, it's restraint, observation, precision. I told them about decisions made in the dark, about operations that never made the news but saved lives, about loyalty that doesn't need a spotlight to survive. I didn't mention Heather, or Eastview, or the plastic trophy. But they were there, in every sentence. When I finished, the room was still silent, and then someone stood. It was Admiral Keating, a man who commanded entire fleets. He nodded. "Commander Ellison," he said, "thank you for reminding us that quiet doesn't mean absent. It often means ready." The room followed with applause. Not thunderous, but solid, earned. It should have been a high point, but all I felt was alone. That night in my quarters, I opened my laptop to send Emily one final message. Just a simple one. "I spoke today. It went well. Wish Mom could have seen it." I hovered over the send button for a long time. Then I clicked delete. What was I doing? begging someone who had decided long ago that nothing I ever did would be enough. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. And for the first time in over a decade, I asked myself a question I'd buried deep. What if I never stop being that girl in the corner? What if no rank, no ribbon, no salute ever makes up for what I didn't get when I needed it most? A mother longer than 12 years, a father who listened, a sister who stayed, a hometown that cared, a friend. Later that week, I was assigned a temporary reassignment to oversee a rotating command training off the coast of San Diego. A break from the East Coast, from Eastview, from myself. But even in motion, I carried the weight. I stood on the flight deck watching jets scream across the horizon and still heard Heather's laugh in my head. Still saw my name missing from the photo. Still felt the sting of my sister's silence. And for all the medals pinned to my chest, there was a growing truth I could no longer ignore. I'd won every battle except the one I never declared the one for my own heart. The girl in the corner didn't just want recognition, she wanted peace. And I didn't know how to give it to her, not yet. I should have felt grounded again. After all, San Diego was familiar territory, clear skies, the steady thrum of aircraft, the rhythm of protocol. But I didn't feel rooted. I felt weightless, as if I'd floated too far from anything real, anything personal. Duty was never the issue. I could carry out missions in my sleep dissect operations in a breath make decisions under pressure that left others frozen. But when the silence came, when the noise of strategy and urgency faded, I was left with myself. And lately, that version of me was unraveling, not in the way people think. I wasn't falling apart in a dramatic mess of tears and mistakes. I was just drifting, numb, disconnected. I took my meals alone. I skipped the officers' gatherings. I walked the base at night just to feel the cold, salt air on my skin. It reminded me I was still in my body, still here. But emotionally, I'd gone dark. And then came the call I didn't expect. It was from Lieutenant Grace Halpern, one of the youngest in my rotation group. Bright, determined. Too much caffeine, too little sleep. She knocked once, then let herself in like it was urgent. "Ma'am," she said, breathless, "you might want to see this." She held up a tablet already cued to a video. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. It was grainy security footage. Indoors. Small town rec center. Then it hit me. The reunion. The moment. Me. The footage was from a cell phone camera someone had uploaded anonymously. The caption read, "When the quiet girl from high school walks out," and a military helicopter lands for her. It had over 4 million views. I blinked. Someone had filmed it. The trophy. Heather's voice. The salute. The command call. And now the world had seen it. The comments were a storm. This gave me chills. Every bullied kid's dream come true. Respect to the real commander. I bet those fake friends are choking right now. I wish I could be like her. Grace was beaming. "Ma'am, you're viral." I stared at the screen. Then I laughed. Not a proud laugh, not even amused. It was bitter. Quiet. Because what the world saw as vindication, I knew, was only half the truth. They didn't see the years I'd gone without hearing my name spoken kindly. They didn't see the letters home that went unanswered, the holidays spent on cold foreign soil, the medals accepted in empty rooms. They didn't see that when the applause fades, you're still alone with yourself, still waiting for someone to say, "You mattered before all of this." And that's what broke me. Not the fame, but the fact that strangers finally saw me, and my own blood still didn't. That night, I pulled out a storage box I rarely opened. Inside were pieces of a past I rarely touched, old photos, childhood report cards, my mother's handwriting on faded recipe cards. And at the very bottom, a letter, unopened, postmarked 6 years ago. From my sister. I hadn't seen it in years. I must have thrown it in the box the week it arrived, still raw from our last fight. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a short note. "Sarah, I don't know where you are anymore. I don't know who you've become. But I still remember the girl who stayed up with me the night Mom died. The one who held my hand at the funeral. The one who whispered I've got you even though she was breaking too. I miss her. Emily. I stared at it for a long time. There was no return address, no phone number, just a memory frozen in ink, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, because all this time I'd painted Emily as the villain of my story, cold, dismissive, resentful. But maybe she was just grieving too. Maybe she'd been waiting for me to reach back and I never did. We both expected each other to be the first to fold. And in the meantime, the silence had turned to stone. The next morning, I took the training squad through a simulation. On paper, it went well. Clean execution, efficient team rotation. But I was elsewhere. I was still that girl holding a letter she should have opened years ago. And finally, after years of armor and silence, I felt something break open. It wasn't dramatic, just a soft unraveling, like a knot that had finally loosened. I told my XO I needed a few hours, and I sat alone in a quiet room on base phone in hand, staring at Emily's contact. Still saved, still there, still untouched. Then, finally, I did what I hadn't done in 5 years. I called. 3 rings, 4, then voicemail. Her voice was exactly the same, calm, crisp, emotionless. I waited for the beep, then spoke. Hey, it's me. I got your letter. A little late. That's on me. A pause. I'm not sure how to do this, or what to say, but I think I'd like to remember that night too, when Mom died, when we were still a team. Another pause. My voice cracked just a little. I've been so many things since then, Em, but not your sister, and I miss her too. I ended the call, and just like that, the weight began to shift. Not gone, but shifting. 3 days passed before Emily replied. Not a call, not a voicemail, just a text. I got your message. I didn't know what to say, I still don't. But maybe we could talk, if you want. There was no heart emoji, no warmth. But it wasn't a door slammed shut either. It was a door cracked open just wide enough to let air through. I stared at the message for hours before I answered. I typed, deleted, retyped. Eventually, I settled on something simple. I do want to talk. Let me know when. No expectations, no emotional landmines. Just the truth. And with that, a decade-long freeze began to thaw. Back on base, the video of the reunion continued to make its rounds. More reposts, more headlines. Commander's reunion moment goes viral from high school ghost to military hero. Meet Sarah Ellison. Eastview, reunion goes sideways. Then helicopter lands. I even received a request for a news interview, which I politely declined. I didn't want to become a meme or a moment. That wasn't the point. The point was never revenge. It was clarity. But there was one thing I did want. A visit. I put in a 2-day personal leave request, no operational conflicts. Approved in less than an hour. I flew commercial this time. No helicopters, no fanfare. Just me and a carry-on bag landing quietly in Michigan. I didn't go to Emily's right away. First, I made a stop. I pulled into the Eastview Community Center parking lot. It was empty now. No balloons, no laughter. Just an echo of what had happened here. I stood in the same spot where the soldier had saluted me, where Heather's words had hit me like a gut punch. I closed my eyes, let it replay. But this time I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was done. They had mocked me when they thought I was beneath them. They had erased me when they realized I wasn't. And now they were behind me. I turned around and walked back to my car. Not rushed, just free. Emily lived in the same house we grew up in. She'd kept it like a time capsule. The wind chimes still hung over the porch. The crack in the second step was still there, the one Mom always warned us about. I knocked. The door opened slowly. She looked tired, softer, like time had rounded the sharp corners of her anger. I didn't speak first. She did. Tea? She asked, her voice flat. Sure. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we used to eat peanut butter toast while Mom sang along to Fleetwood Mac. It was quiet, but not cold. I watched her stir sugar into her cup. You made the news, she finally said. I nodded. I didn't post the video, I added. Someone else did. I figured. She didn't smile, but she didn't roll her eyes either. She took a sip, then set the cup down. I saw you get in that helicopter, she said. Didn't know what to think. You weren't supposed to, I said. It wasn't for them. It was an extraction. I know. More silence. Then, that night when you left for the Navy, I didn't hate you. I looked up. She kept her eyes on the tea. I just didn't know how to do it alone. And I guess I blamed you for not being scared the way I was. I breathed out slowly. I was terrified, I said. But I couldn't stay. I needed to be someone else. She nodded slowly. I know that now. The tension in the room dropped a degree. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a beginning. Later that night, we sat on the back porch, the same porch where we used to lay on blankets and stare up at constellations. She pulled out a small box. I kept these, she said, handing it to me. Inside were old photos, one of me in middle school holding a science fair ribbon, one of us on Halloween dressed as astronauts, and one I didn't know existed, Mom, holding both our hands, smiling so wide it almost hurt to look at. I ran my finger over the surface. I thought you erased me, I said softly. I was angry, she admitted, but I didn't forget you. That meant more than she probably knew. Before I left, we hugged. It wasn't long. It wasn't movie scene emotional, but her arms wrapped around mine and she whispered, "Come back sometime, okay?" And for once, I didn't feel like a ghost visiting her grave. I felt like a sister, a real one. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the driveway watching the sunrise over Eastview one last time. I didn't feel hate or resentment or even that bitter itch for recognition. I felt still. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not fanfare, not public apologies, just a quiet moment when your past stops chasing you, and you realize you're already whole. I flew back to San Diego lighter than I had in years. There was no parade waiting, no speeches, no viral moments waiting to be caught on camera, just the slow, silent hum of a second chance unfolding. And that was enough. Back on base, the wind off the ocean was crisp and familiar. As I walked the runway toward my office, a few junior officers nodded in my direction, respectful but not intrusive. The kind of nod you give to someone you know has earned her silence. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd trained myself to be invisible. Now I was learning how to be seen on my own terms. My first week back was uneventful. Routine reports, strategy briefs, a simulation request from Naval War College I agreed to review. But my internal rhythm had shifted. There was less urgency to prove, less need to anticipate every attack, real or emotional. Instead, I listened more. I mentored without overcompensating. I gave space where I once filled silence with tactical precision. And one evening, I sat down and began something I never thought I would: a letter. To Heather. I didn't do it out of forgiveness or vengeance. I did it because I was done carrying her weight. Heather, we've never been friends, so I won't pretend this is sentimental, but I wanted you to know something. You didn't break me. You tried. With your jokes, your dismissals, your cutting little remarks meant to shrink me. And maybe you succeeded for a while, but I became more than the girl you laughed at. I became a commander, not for your approval, but in spite of your silence. That night at the reunion wasn't revenge. It wasn't some dramatic gotcha moment. It was a reminder mostly to myself that who I am isn't defined by people like you. I hope you find peace in your own way. I already have. Sarah. I didn't mail it. I didn't need to. Writing it was the closure. A week later, I was invited to speak at a mentorship summit for young female officers across branches. I hesitated. These things always walk a fine line between inspiration and spectacle. But something in me said yes. Not because I needed another spotlight, because I was ready to share the light. The room was packed, rows of women in various uniforms, sharp-eyed, determined, and somewhere in their silence, probably hiding their own Heather. When I stepped up to the podium, I didn't recite my resume. I told them the truth. That I grew up thinking invisibility was my only form of protection. That I used silence as both a shield and a prison. That sometimes the most dangerous wounds come not from war, but from being erased in your own life. And I told them this: You don't need to fight for someone else's approval. You don't need to win their games. You only need to write your own rule book and stick to it like your life depends on it. Because sometimes it does. When I stepped down, the applause was warm, but it wasn't the applause that moved me. It was the young cadet who approached me afterward, trembling slightly. "My sister's like yours," she said. "Always made me feel like I didn't belong, but hearing you, I think I finally understand. I don't need her permission to be proud of myself." I nodded. "No, you don't." And in that moment, I realized what all the battles had led to. Not glory, not recognition, not revenge, but usefulness. I could give what I never received, and in doing so, I could heal. Later that month, I got a postcard in the mail. No return address. Just block letters that said, I opened the envelope. That picture scared me. Not because you looked powerful, but because you looked like someone I never really knew. I'd like to fix that, if you're willing. It wasn't signed, but I knew. Emily. I didn't cry, but I smiled, wide, full, open. Because this time I wasn't alone in reaching across the silence. That weekend, I took a walk along the water. No phone, no earbuds, just the wind and the crash of the tide. And I thought about something Mom used to say years ago when the world felt impossibly big. Don't chase light, baby. Carry it. Back then, I didn't understand what she meant. But I do now. You don't rise by proving your worth to people who never intended to see it. You rise by becoming the kind of woman who can sit in any room, any silence, any storm, and still radiate something unshakable. Not loud, not perfect, just whole. And finally, I was. When the email invitation came, I almost deleted it without reading. Subject Eastview Class of 2005. Summer picnic. There it was again. That name. That place. A town frozen in time, trying for yet another chance to remind me where I didn't belong. My finger hovered over trash, but I didn't click. Instead, I opened it. It was simple, an open invite, nothing fancy, just a casual park gathering for old classmates and their families. Bring your own chairs, potluck-style kids welcome no speeches. Heather's name wasn't on the planning list this time. Maybe she was laying low after the video. Maybe she wasn't even coming. Still, the thought of returning felt absurd, like inviting myself into the last chapter of a book I never finished. But a quiet voice stirred in me. Not angry, just curious. What if I go not for them? Not to prove anything, just to look at the place and the people without flinching, to see what still held power over me, and take it back. The day of the picnic, I arrived early. No helicopter this time, no uniform, just jeans, a clean blouse, and sunglasses. Civilian, anonymous, choice. The park hadn't changed much, same patchy grass, same rusty swing set, same concrete pavilion with peeling paint. A few early birds were setting up food on folding tables. Laughter floated on the breeze like it was trying too hard. I took a seat on a bench near the edge, just close enough to observe, just far enough to disappear. Within minutes, I saw familiar faces trickling in. Brian, Jamie, even Lila Anders, who used to copy my math homework and then pretend not to know me in the cafeteria. None of them looked my way. None of them recognized me, and for the first time, that didn't sting. It felt like freedom. Then I saw her. Heather. She looked the same. A little more tired around the eyes. A little too carefully dressed. Still laughing too loudly, still controlling the circle of chairs she sat in. She glanced around and briefly locked eyes with me. There was a flicker. Recognition, surprise. Fear. Whatever it was, she turned quickly and whispered something to the woman next to her. I didn't move, didn't approach, didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing I cared. I sat steady and still until her group's laughter started to sound strained. It wasn't revenge, it was presence, and that was enough. About an hour in, a voice called from behind. "Sarah?" I turned. It was Lila. She looked unsure, holding a paper plate and blinking like she wasn't convinced it was really me. "Wow! You came?" she said. I nodded. "Seems so." She smiled a little awkward. I saw the video. Everyone did? I didn't know you were well. I mean, I didn't think you were a person I offered dry. Her face flushed. No, I mean, yes. Just, we were kids. I studied her for a beat. And then I let her off the hook. We were, I said simply, kids with no idea how deep words can cut. Lila looked down at her plate. I'm sorry, for everything, for laughing back then, for standing by while you don't owe me anything I said. She looked up, but I appreciate it. I added. Really? Her smile softened. Real this time, and in that small exchange a piece of my past unknotted itself. A few more people approached after that, some cautious, some warm, all surprised. I talked, briefly, lightly. I didn't need them to know my full story. I didn't need them to grovel or clap or post about it online. I just needed to walk through this old battlefield and realize I no longer bled here. As the sun dipped low and families packed up, I stood by my car and watched the light spill across the grass. I didn't wait for Heather to come over. She never did, but I noticed her glancing back once before getting in her car. And that glance, it wasn't dismissive. It was something else. Unease, maybe, regret, or simply the realization that the girl she thought she'd erased had become the woman everyone else now saw. And more importantly, the woman who saw herself. Before I left town, I made one last stop. The cemetery. Mom's grave was dappled in golden light, the same kind we used to chase during summer evenings. I knelt beside the stone and rested my palm against it. Eastview doesn't own me anymore, I whispered. But I wanted you to know. I made it back. Stronger. Not louder. Just whole. The wind stirred the trees gently like a soft hand smoothing the page of an old chapter. I smiled. And I left. No medals, no closure speeches. Just a quiet return. One that didn't need applause. Because the girl who was once mocked had become the woman who didn't need permission to stand tall. And now she wasn't standing alone. It's been 6 months since the picnic. 6 months since I walked back into the world that once shrank me and left without shrinking myself. In that time, a lot has changed, and nothing has. I'm still a commander in the Navy, still handling operations, managing teams, balancing the high-stakes dance between intelligence and diplomacy. Still waking at dawn, still responding to late-night calls, still carrying the weight of decisions I can't always explain to civilians. But somewhere deeper, I'm not the same. There's a stillness now, not weakness, not complacency, just a quiet kind of confidence. The kind you only get after walking back into your oldest wound and finding that it no longer bleeds. Emily and I speak now, not every day, not even every week, but when we do, it's real. She came to visit me in San Diego last month, first time she'd ever been on a military base. I showed her around, introduced her to a few officers. We had fish tacos near the marina and walked the cliffs at Torrey Pines until the sun dipped low and golden. We didn't talk about Mom, or the past, not much. But we didn't have to. Some wounds heal in silence. Some bridges don't need rebuilding, they just need time to stop burning. Sometimes I still think about Heather, not with bitterness anymore, just curiosity. I wonder what it feels like to spend your life trying to stay on top of a pyramid you built on other people's backs. I wonder if she watches that video now and hears the silence that followed my name, the silence not of shame, but of shock. I wonder if she ever looks back and realizes the moment that once felt like a joke became my liberation. But it's not about her anymore. It never really was. A few weeks ago, I gave another talk this time to a group of teenage girls from military families. They were smart, fierce, a little scared, a little too eager to prove they belonged in spaces that were never designed for them. I saw myself in them. And after I gave my speech, one girl, maybe 16, raised her hand and asked a question I hadn't prepared for. How do you stop caring what people think? The room went still, and I thought about Heather, about the reunion, about the trophy, the plastic chair, the missed birthdays, the silence from Emily. The moment I picked up the phone anyway, I smiled and answered her honestly. You don't, I said, not completely, but you learn to care more about what you think. You stop giving away your power just to be accepted. And you start building a life that feels strong even if no one ever claps for it. She nodded slowly, and I knew she got it, the way I wish I had back when I was her age. That night, I stood on the pier watching the ships roll in under a soft, salt-stained sky. The wind wrapped around me like a quiet promise. I thought about the reunion again. Not the insult, not the humiliation, but the helicopter. The voice that broke the silence of an entire childhood, Commander Ma'am. We need you. Now. Not Sarah, we forgive you. Not Sarah, we finally see you. Just a call to action. A reminder of who I had become. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition. From the only voice that ever really mattered, my own. So here's what I've learned. You can leave the town that broke you. You can rise through fire and steel and silence. You can walk into rooms filled with the same people who once laughed behind your back and realize they're just people. And you're something more. Not because of medals, not because of viral videos, but because you survived becoming yourself. That's the real power, not proving them wrong, but becoming so right in your own skin that their opinions evaporate. I keep the reunion trophy now, not out of spite. It sits on my shelf beside my Navy commendations and overseas ribbons, a small plastic symbol of something they gave me without realizing it, the moment I stopped needing their permission to matter. And every time I see it, I smile, because they mocked me at the class reunion. But then, the sky opened, the blades roared, and a voice called through the crowd, "Commander, ma'am, we need you. Now." And I answered, not for them, but for me. And this time, I never looked back.